Hey friends, welcome back to Acre Homestead. My name is Becky and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we are going to be making a lot of rhubarb jam. I have 22 cups of rhubarb here. What I did earlier is when I went out to the garden to harvest it, I brought it in and I washed it. And as I was chopping, I went ahead and measured it out at the same time. Because what I want to do, because I have so much here and I want to make sure I preserve it all, is I wanted to know how many cups I would have in here, and it was just easier to chop and measure at the same time so that I wouldn't have to do it right now. So each rhubarb recipe calls for 6 cups. So I can make almost 4 batches with this. I do have a little bit in the freezer I'll pull out so that I can make 4 total batches. But down in the description box, I'll leave a link for just a 1 batch recipe so that if you don't want to make 4 batches like I am, you can easily just make 1 batch. We not only are going to make this jam, but we are also going to go ahead and can it as well. If you're new to canning, I'll walk you through the steps of canning. It's super simple. It's a water bath canning recipe and anyone can do it, even you. I know some of you guys have mentioned to me that you're a little intimidated getting started with canning, but jam is a great one to start with because it's a very safe thing to can because the sugar levels are so high and the acidity level is so high. It's very unlikely that you're gonna mess it up and that it's not gonna be a safe product to eat. So I have everything out that I need to make the jam. It's pretty simple. All we need is rhubarb, cane sugar, which is in that blue bucket. When I'm making jams in this quantity, I find it easier just to pull my big bulk bucket out as opposed to using a container that I keep up in my cupboard with sugar because we're gonna be going through a lot of sugar. And then I would just have to refill that anyway with this bucket. So I just grabbed the big bucket out. We just need some bowls to hold the sugar, a little bit of butter, low sugar pectin, and 2 pots out because that's gonna save us time if we have 2 going at one time. So along with the recipe that I'm gonna link down in the description box, I'll also link where I get my 25-pound bag of organic cane sugar because I love buying in bulk and it's a good price for organic cane sugar. And then I will link all the equipment needed to make this recipe along with canning. But let's go ahead and make the jam recipe. So first things first, I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the stove on a medium and I'm gonna put about 1/2 cup of water in each one of these Dutch ovens. And then we're gonna measure out 12 cups of rhubarb in each one of these. This is the one that had a little less rhubarb, so I'm gonna go ahead and throw in my frozen rhubarb. So I have the stove on medium still, and I went ahead and put a lid on each one of these, so it helps speed up the cooking process. Takes a little bit of time for rhubarb to cook down, unlike a strawberry jam or something like that. Let's go ahead and get the sugar measured out. Now we need 8 cups of sugar in each one of these bowls. This was the bowl that had the rhubarb in it. I just hate to dirty another dish, so we're just gonna go ahead and use this one. So believe it or not, this is actually a low sugar rhubarb recipe. A lot of recipes for rhubarb jam actually call for 7 cups of sugar for 6 cups of fruit. So into our respective bowls, we're gonna put 2 packages of low sugar pectin. This is my favorite low sugar pectin. I've tried Pomona's before and I was not really happy with the taste. It kind of had a weird aftertaste to me. That totally could have been user error because I did a very low sugar recipe with it. So I might try it again, but so far Pomona's has not been my favorite. Oops, making a mess. And then we're gonna mix these together. It looks like these are already starting to boil and break down just a little bit. So what we're gonna do now is take our sugar pectin mixture and we're gonna mix that in. So you've noticed that I said I'm doubling these recipes. So in each one of these pots, I have 2 recipes. If you look online on recipes or if you read recipe books or if you look on the packages of like the Sure-Fill, it says, do not double the recipe if you're making jams or jellies. And I didn't for years and years. But then when I got to the point where I'm making as much jam that I'm making, I don't have time to do 4 separate batches of this. So I have to double the recipe. And I started doing that probably 5 years ago and I've never had a problem with it. Now I've only ever doubled it. I've never tripled or quadrupled it. So I can't speak to that. But I honestly have never had a problem doubling a jam recipe and having it set. So if you're comfortable with that, you can try it too. Just know that you're a little bit more guaranteed to get a set on your jam if you don't double it. So what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna let this jam cook. It's gonna break down the fruit. And when it comes to a rolling boil, then we're gonna add the rest of the sugar and we'll go to the next step. Taking a potato masher here and I'm just lightly mashing it just to get any of the chunks because this is almost ready to add the rest of the sugar. But in the meantime, I'm gonna add a pat of butter to each one of these. I'm actually gonna add 2 pats because it's a double recipe. What the butter does is it's supposed to help prevent some of this foaming in here. I mean, I don't really worry about the foaming, but I just add it anyway. And now I'm gonna go ahead and add a teaspoon of salt to each one of these containers. When you're adding salt to canning recipes, you need to make sure they're non-iodized salt. Salt is an ingredient that I add to my jams. Most recipes online or in books do not have salt in their jam recipes, which I don't know why. You're putting so much sugar into it, and there's sugar in the fruit, that adding just that little bit of salt really helps balance the flavor, and you get a much more balanced and rounded flavor when you add salt. So that is a optional ingredient. You don't have to add the salt, but I would highly recommend you do it. And I do buy my salt in bulk as well, and I make sure that no salt that I buy in my house is iodized so that I can use it for cooking and canning. So this one's ready to go. It's had a rolling boil. So we're gonna add the sugar. Now what's gonna happen is it's gonna stop boiling because that sugar is gonna drop the temperature. I'm gonna go ahead and add the sugar to this one. And now what we need is for these to come back up to a rolling boil and boil at that rolling boil for 1 minute. This is gonna take a few minutes for the temperature to get back up to a boil. In the meantime, while I'm waiting for the jam to boil, I'm not just sitting here idle. I actually just went and picked a bunch of blueberries out of my garden today, and I have a ton in the freezer that were picked. But what happens when you pick blueberries is a lot of times there's green ones, there's ones with stems left behind. So what I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm just taking any stems off, picking any green ones out, picking any bad ones out. And I'm actually gonna be making blueberry jam right after this. So I'm trying to use my time efficiently. I also have all my jars prepped and ready to go. The way I did that was last night. I actually threw them in the dishwasher and I ran them through the cycle. You do not have to technically sterilize your jars if you're canning, but I do like to make sure they're nice and clean, and that's why I do like to run them through the dishwasher. Do you see how that's boiling and I can't stir the boil away? That's exactly what you want. Excuse the sugary mess, but I'm gonna set the timer for 1 minute for this one. And this one looks ready too, so I'm gonna go ahead and set the timer for this one. It's not boiling quite as much as that one, but it still is definitely boiling. Now this jam is looking a lot darker on camera than it is in person. Rhubarb jam is one of those funny things that sometimes it can turn out pink, sometimes it can turn out green. It really just depends on the color of the rhubarb, but it all tastes really good. So I'm gonna just fill my jars up and I'm gonna leave about a 1/4 inch headspace. If you're new to canning, headspace just means from the rim of the jar to where the jam is. So from the rim to where the jam starts, there's about a 1/4 inch. I was canning all my jams in pints. I like to can a lot of my jams in half pints, but with the canning lid shortage, I didn't want to waste as many lids, but now I think I'm set on lids, so I want to try to get some in half pints so that I can gift them. There is a surefire way to know if your jam is set or not. Just take a spoonful of it, put it on a little plate, throw it in the freezer for about a minute, and if when you take it out of the freezer, it's set, then you know your jam is set. Now, I'm not gonna do that because I can already tell when I scraped my spatula along the outside to get the last of it out, it's already starting to set, so this is gonna be a beautiful, thick jam. This is the perfect time to go run to your farmer's market if you don't have your own rhubarb plants to make this. My other jam is already off the stove, and what I've done is I took that opportunity to go ahead and put my canner on the stove. I filled it with really warm tap water, as warm as tap water as I could. So while I keep filling up these jars, I'm gonna get that water heating up. I'm actually gonna be water bath canning in my pressure canner today. And then because I'm gonna be making blueberry jam right after this pot is gonna be really easy to clean because it's still hot and the sugar hasn't set. So get this in some water, rinse it out real quick, and then I can reuse it. So now I'm gonna take a clean, damp cloth and I'm gonna run it around the rim to make sure there's no jam on the rim to inhibit a seal. I'm also gonna feel around the rim too at this time to make sure there's not any nicks or chips or anything that will inhibit the seal as well. Then we're gonna take a canning lid and a ring and we're just gonna screw it on. Now that our water is pretty warm, we're gonna go ahead and put our jars in there. What we wanna do is make sure there's at least 1 inch of water over the jar. We're gonna wait for it to come to a rolling boil, and then we're gonna set the timer for 10 minutes. Some canning times can be different if you're above sea level by 1,000 feet. So go ahead and just check your area just to make sure what your canning time is supposed to be. After it boiled for 10 minutes, I turned the stove off. For about 5 minutes, I just let everything sit on the stove and cool down just a little bit before removing the jars from the pot. And here we have it, all jarred up and ready to go. Now this is definitely the dark, that's hot. Now this is definitely the darkest rhubarb jam I've ever made, but the flavor is so good. And I can't wait to dig into this. We got 8 pints and we got 8 half pints out of 4 recipes, which is pretty exciting. Obviously that's more jam than my husband and I can go through in a year with all the other jams that I do. Some ways that I actually like to use our homegrown jam, not just on like toast or peanut butter and jelly, because we don't really eat a lot of toast or peanut butter and jelly. I make baked oatmeal for my husband and I use it as a sweetener and a flavoring agent in my husband's baked oatmeal. I use it for myself. I buy plain yogurt or I make plain yogurt. Then I can add a spoonful of my homemade homegrown jam, which I think is pretty cool. And then I can kind of control how much sugar goes into my yogurt, because sometimes if you've ever looked at the back of yogurts, it's kind of incredible how much sugar is in them. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I definitely like to use them as gifts, as bartering agents, and all sorts of things like that. So I'm grateful to have this on my pantry shelf. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me in my kitchen. If you want to see more what I have going on around here, like I have a big bowl of blueberries there, and a big bowl and probably 2 or 3 more of these bowls worth in my freezer that I need to finish destemming so that I can go ahead and right after this, I'm gonna jump in and I'm gonna make some blueberry jam. Go ahead and consider subscribing so that you can see that video when it comes out. If you wanna watch more of my videos, some will pop up right here and you can go ahead and watch those. I love when you guys hang out with me in my kitchen. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and I can't wait to see you guys next time. Bye guys.